Welcome back to Pokkén Basics. Now that you know the controls and mechanics, there are only two things stopping us from getting into strategy building. We need to cover input notation and terminology. After finishing this chapter, you'll be able to understand everything I say in future videos clearly, and you won't be lost when you're reading forum posts or listening to other players or commentators talk about the game. This video is going to be pretty long, so I suggest either taking notes or bookmarking the written guide for future reference. Think of this chapter less as something you watch all the way through and more as something you can keep referring back to as you encounter terms that you don't know. Let's start with input notation because it will make it easier to understand all the other definitions. Pokken players use numpad notation where the numbers in this image correspond to different directions. So for Shadow Mewtwo, 4A would be Miracle Eye or Back A, 6A would be Zen Headbutt, 8A would be Side Strike, and 2A would be Teleport. 1A and 3A would be to teleport with down back and down forward respectively. In field phase, the notation is more straightforward. It's just forward, back, and side. So FY would be forward Y. Closed brackets mean to hold a button down, and open brackets means to release a button after holding it. I'll link a thread from Milne so you can see this in written form. With that out of the way, let's move on to terminology or the jargon of Pokken and fighting games in general. I'll mostly be going in alphabetical order, but some of the definitions require me to explain other terms, so I'll skip around just a little bit. Let us commence with the ultimate visual glossary of Pokken. Air teching or air drifting is the act of holding a direction while your character is knocked into the air to land in a different spot. Getting knocked into the air in a state where you can air tech itself is called an air reset. Air teching is especially useful after a phase shift to create distance when opponents try to run under you. Of note is that the CPU in training mode generally does either no tech or air techs backwards. Armor is the property of being able to absorb an attack without taking hit stun. Hit stun is when your character reels from an attack and cannot move. There are three types of armor in Pokken: blue armor, red armor, and burst mode's light armor. Blue armor comes from counterattacks, command counters, and certain burst attacks such as Suicune and Chandelure. Command counters are character-specific counterattacks done with inputs other than X plus A. Blue armor doesn't have a specific limit to the amount of hits it can absorb, but they only have so many frames that they can absorb attacks. I don't know the exact number of frames, but it's different depending on the move. In general, command counters seem to have a lower threshold than normal counterattacks, but they also are more likely to flat out beat moves with a lot of hits anyway. Blue armor can be thrown and counter-pierced. Throwing blue armor usually grants a critical hit, but not when you grab a support's blue armor. Red armor is similar to blue armor in that it absorbs attacks, but there are a few differences. One major difference is that the character still takes damage while absorbing attacks, unlike blue armor. Red armor can also only absorb 9 hits before it wears off. You also cannot throw red armor. It counts as an attack for the purpose of the attack triangle. Red armor can be counter-pierced, but it doesn't show a distinct animation when doing so. Lastly, red armor is not immune from phase shift points, so you can still be shifted out of dual phase when your PSP gets maxed out. Red armor isn't very common, but moves such as Chandelure's Overheat, Mewtwo and Shadow Mewtwo's Side Strike, and Garchomp's Burst Attack have red armor. Certain stances also have red or blue armor properties. Light armor occurs in burst mode and lets you take 9 hits from light attacks before wearing off. You still take damage while you're in light armor, and throws work against light armor just like normal. Similar to red armor, you can still take PSP from light attacks. Now what counts as a light attack is frankly extremely arbitrary. It's not just all Y moves, so I've linked a list showing all the moves that ignore burst's light armor. One thing the armors share in common is that all armors still take hit stop, which is different from hit stun. When an attack makes contact with a character, doesn't matter hit or block or armor, the game will have a visual sort of slowdown to simulate an impact. Hit stop is also called impact freeze. For the purpose of frame data, which I'll get to shortly, it doesn't change anything. But hit stop has two actual effects on the match. First is, it delays the action of whichever characters are in hit stop. So for instance, if I'm Shadow Mewtwo and I do a 5Y or jab, and the opponent blocks it or gets hit, we both get stuck in impact freeze, so everything plays out normally. But if I do pillar into Miracle Eye, my attack is making contact with the opponent, so they get stuck in hit stop, but I'm free to move normally because I'm not actually touching anything. Putting opponents into extra hit stop with projectiles is a good way to make your character safe from armored attacks, since you can throw them or block on reaction without committing. The second effective hit stop is, it determines how much real world time both players have to react to a move. For example, Blaziken's 6Y by itself is unsafe on block against almost the entire cast. They can usually 2Y or throw it. But you almost never see it punished because the amount of hit stop or impact freeze is so small. By the time the opponent recognizes what happened on the screen and tries to punish, Blaziken has enough time to recover and block or avoid the attack. Okay, that's red armor, blue armor, light armor, hit stun, and hit stop. The rest of these definitions are going to be a lot faster, trust me. Blocking, guarding, shielding. This just means holding R to defend against an attack. Different characters have different shield strengths. For instance, Shadow Mewtwo's shield is very weak compared to Machamp's, so you can break it with less hits. While you're blocking, it actually slightly extends the range your opponent can throw you, so be aware of that. A block string is a series of attacks done while the opponent is blocking. While you're blocking an attack, you are in block stun. For instance, doing Blaziken's YYY into EX Blaze Kicks is a block string. In Pokken, most sequences of attacks have gaps, or periods where the opponent can stop blocking and interrupt your action. A block string with no gaps is called a true block string. In burst mode, versus certain characters, Blaziken's 5YYY into EX Blaze Kicks is a true block string, meaning that after you block the first hit, even if you mash or put down the controller, your character is stuck in block stun and cannot move for the entire sequence. Buffering is inputting a move during the action of another move. So for instance, if I'm Lucario, I can press 2Y, and while it's out, I can press 6A. I'm buffering the 6A Bone Rush into the 2Y. If you do it quickly enough, then the 2Y whiffs. Nothing happens, but if it makes contact, the 2Y will cancel into Bone Rush. CADC, Counterattack Dash Cancel. Canceling your counterattack into a dash by holding X plus A and then pressing R and then a direction while still holding X plus A. A cancel is the act of stopping your move's recovery early and doing a different move. So if I press Y, Shadow Mewtwo does this jab and then he stops. If I press YY, he stops the ending animation of his jab to do another one. You can cancel different moves into different attacks, like Pokemon moves. There's a lot of variety. Clashing is when two moves with the same strength connect with each other on the same frame. The strength of a move is kind of an arbitrary value, so it's trial and error to see if two moves will clash and which one will win. And I have another video on this which I will link. A combo happens when you hit the opponent with an attack and then hit them with another attack before they can block again. An easy way to see if your attack actually combos is to go in training mode and set the CPU to stand still and react with block. Then do two attacks. If it actually combos, they won't be able to block the second hit. If the CPU ever blocks in the middle of your attacks, either the attacks don't combo or your timing for the combo was incorrect. A critical hit occurs when you win an exchange in the attack triangle. But I'm not going to go in depth here. That's in my first video. Exhaust is the transition from burst mode back to your regular form when your synergy gauge runs out. Crow actually wrote an excellent article on SRK that explains it better than I could, and I've linked it in the description. But basically, once your meter runs out and you're on the ground, not in the middle of any action, you flash white. During this time, most of your inputs get cancelled out except for block. However, you do get a little bit of invincibility, and this applies whether you're attacking or defending. You can use a move that should be punishable or get exhausted in the middle of being comboed, and you might phase through the opponent's attack. Usually this just ends up messing up your inputs, but if you're aware that your burst is going to run out, you can hold any direction on the D-pad and it will give you extra invincibility. Now a lot of people don't know this, and even people who do know about it like me don't really use it to its full potential, so a lot of times you'll see people going for grabs when the other player is about to go into exhaust. If you try to break the throw, a lot of times your input won't come out and you'll get thrown anyway, which is why people do it. So it's best to hold a direction for a little bit, then try to break the throw normally. Frame data is something I'm going to make a separate video on, but here's the fast version. Pokken, like most fighting games, runs at 60 frames per second. This means that 60 still images are shown every second to give the illusion of movement on the screen. So one frame is 1/60th of a second. Now every attack has a different amount of startup, active frames, and recovery animation. These are all measured in frames, and the collection of that information is called frame data. Your HP bar starts as one solid color, but as the match progresses, some of the damage you take becomes gray life or recoverable HP. Some people call it white life, it doesn't matter. You can recover some of your health by using a support, winning a field phase, or activating burst mode. On the other hand, losing field phase or getting wall blasted takes away recoverable HP for good. Characters that do recoil damage to themselves like Charizard, Blaziken, and Shadow Mewtwo are always looking for ways to restore that HP back before it gets removed completely. Attacks have multiple heights. The basic divisions are high, mid, and low, but there are also mid-highs, mid-lows, and special mids. There's a detailed thread from Pental, the Bone Rush Jesus, that details all the different height interactions, and I've linked that in the description, but here's the basic overview. Highs strike near a character's head, and most characters can duck them. The characters that cannot duck highs are Blaziken, Garchomp, Mewtwo, Shadow Mewtwo, and Machamp. Lows hit the lower portion of a character. You can jump lows frame 1, meaning if your character just stood up after being knocked down, if you mash B, you'll jump over low even if the attack is already out. So highs can be ducked, lows can be jumped over. Mids cannot be ducked or jumped over. Now there are mid-lows and mid-highs, which are similar to mids but with some shortcomings. Mid-lows can be jumped frame 5, and mid-highs lose to moves with upper body invincibility. Profiling is the act of avoiding a move with another. So if I use a low stance X or 2X to go under a move, that means I low profiled it. A high profile would be using a move like Blaziken's high stance X or 8X, which goes over mid-lows on frame 9. A hitbox is the part of an attack that can damage an opponent. A hurtbox is the part of a character that can be hit by an opponent's hitbox. So for instance, holding down with Lucario shifts its hurtbox so it avoids Blaziken's 5Y hitbox. Similar to a hurt and a hitbox is a collision box. This is the part of a character, generally their center, that doesn't let them pass through other characters. Some moves like teleports make your character vanish, remove your hurtbox, and passes through opposing hitboxes, but sometimes they still cannot pass through an opponent's collision box. Homing canceling is a very important technique to know. Homing attack is done with X in field phase. You can break a throw with homing, then press block, and the opponent will still be in their throw recovery animation, so you can follow up with whatever attack you want. Homing canceling is safer than breaking throws with other attacks or the regular homing because you don't have to commit to a move. You can also use homing and then block immediately against single hitting attacks like Burst Mode's Shockwave. When you do, this is called perfect blocking. An instant air dash is the act of air dashing as fast as possible. So for Mewtwo, it's doing the air dash very low to the ground. Blaziken and other characters use the same term, but Mewtwo's is the only air dash that I would actually consider instant. Adjust frame is a property that certain attacks have where if you do the inputs with perfect timing or on the correct frame, then you get a better, usually more powerful version of the attack. A knockdown, also known as a hard knockdown, is when your character is knocked to the ground obviously, but not when they just tumble. It's specifically when they fall down and they're stuck on the ground for a set period of time. It's important to know what moves cause hard knockdowns because you can do consistent setups after them since the opponent always rises at the same time and in the same spot, unlike air resets. Unlike other games like Street Fighter, there's no quick rise, so there's generally just a tumble, an air reset, or a hard knockdown. L cancel. I don't usually use this term, but other Pokken players do, so it's good to know anyway. An L cancel is starting up a move as you're landing to reduce the recovery frames of your landing. So if I'm Shadow Mewtwo and I do a jumping Y, then right before I hit the ground, I press A to do reflect. Shadow Mewtwo will turn blue, but reflect won't come out. I cancel the recovery of my landing into reflect, which gives me less frame disadvantage when I land. A link is a combo where your character returns to neutral at some point before you use your next attack. So doing Blaziken's 5Y into Blaze Kicks is a cancel, but doing 5X into Blaze Kicks is a link because Blaziken had to return to neutral before doing so. A lockout is when all of your inputs except for block are temporarily disabled. Certain homing attacks like Mewtwo, Shadow Mewtwo, and Machamp have this property of locking out all the opponent's inputs so you can safely pressure them without worrying about reversals. Well, they used to, but they apparently in DX removed this property from these moves. Based Harada. But it's good to know the term anyway. You might hear some people call this a frame trap, but that's not an accurate way to describe a lockout. A frame trap is when you leave an intentional gap in your block string to bait opponents into pressing a button to escape. But when they fall into your trap, they get hit because you still have frame advantage. A lockout is a type of frame trap, but the difference is the opponent literally can't move or press any buttons at all except block. Meaty is a tough one because the original definition kind of got split in two, so let me break it down. Most attacks have multiple active frames. So let's say for instance a move has 5 active frames, meaning the attack stays out for 5 frames while it can actually hit an opponent. A meaty attack would be using the move so that only the last frame or last few frames connect with the opponent. So I'd make it so this move connected on the 5th frame for instance. What this does, depending on the move, is grant your attack more frame advantage than it normally would. I'll explain why in my frame data video. Now, in order to actually do this and make your moves hit on the later frames of the animation, you usually have to hit the opponent just as they are getting up, so the first few frames whiff and only the end connects with them. This is why the act of hitting an opponent just as they get up or recover from an air reset is also called a meaty. Oki is any sort of setup or move you use when the opponent is getting up from a knockdown or air reset. Oki often gets used synonymously with meaty. An option select is when you do an input or series of inputs where you get a different action depending on the circumstance. A few examples are the most basic buffer option select. So, for example, Lucario, in my example from before, was whiffing 2Y and buffering 6A on whiff, nothing comes out, but only on contact will Bone Rush come out. The option selects in Pokken that I personally use are based on Pokke combos, and I'll show an example at the end of this. Option selects vary a lot in terms of usefulness and how much execution is required. I'll make an entire other video about option selects in one of the later chapters because it's a pretty complex topic that not very many people understand, even people who throw the term around a lot. Pokke combo. This is actually the most complex beginner mechanic I've ever seen in any video game, especially because they don't explain it. A Pokke combo is a specific type of cancel where you cancel the same button into itself. So Y into Y. If you look at your character's move list, you'll see a ton of Pokke combos. Pokke combos seem to be made to allow people to mash out combos easily, but the way they implemented it actually makes it super complicated, so here's the deal. In dual phase, pressing YY does your jab cancel into a follow-up normal attack. But after the second Y, there's a ton of variation. So with Blaziken, Y 3 times does this string of punches into a knee, but for Shadow Mewtwo, pressing Y 3 times does the 2 jabs, but the third Y actually activates Psywave, which is a Pokemon move. Somewhere in each character's Pokke combo is going to be a Pokemon move. So with Blaziken, pressing Y 4 times ends in Blaze Kicks. So basically you did the 3 Ys, but the 4th Y was your Pokemon move, which was actually forward A. In the Shadow Mewtwo example, you did the 2 Ys, which were the jabs, and the third wave was the Psywave. And if you keep on pressing Y, you'll do the Psywave slashes. Now when you get to the Pokemon move part of your Pokke combo, you don't have to end it the way the game wants you to by default. The Y just acts as A in whichever direction the game pre-assigns. You can also just hold the 4th Y to give you EX Blaze Kicks instead of the regular version. Pokke combos work similarly to how chains work in the Budokai games, in the sense that even after you've input several buttons, you can overwrite your inputs with other buttons as long as you do it before the character gets to that part of the combo. So if you're mashing Y, 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 but you decide partway that you want to do Blaze Kicks instead, you can do 6A at any point and it will cancel out the remaining Ys. Pokke combos also apply to moves in other directions. Like Lucario's 2YY, you can change the Pokemon move into whatever move you want. So you could do like 2Y into the Aura Sphere if you want it. I suggest whenever you get to the Pokemon move part of your Pokke combo to stop pressing Y and instead press A in whatever direction you want, so you have full control over your Pokke combo. There are Pokke combos you can do from the ground, from the air, all kinds. Bottom line is Pokke combos are the game's way of allowing you to easily do combos by canceling the same button into itself. At the end of this video, I'm going to show you how you can abuse Pokke combos to do some super sick stuff, just as a bonus for watching the whole thing. A safe jump is a jumping attack timed so that the attacker can block in time to be safe from a reversal. A reversal basically is any attack that you do during your wake up or during a block string on the first frame you can move. I have an entire video on this which I've linked in the description. Throws are broken using any normal attack. Breaking a throw is called throw teching, or just teching. However, if the throw hits you early in your attack startup animation, you will stagger and not do any damage in return. Throw crushes are specific moves that always beat throws without staggering. I've linked a list of those moves in the description. All 8X's, all homing attacks, and most 2Ys crush throws. A wall blast is when a character gets phase shifted after a wall splat, so the game blasts them off again. This gets rid of gray life and forces distance between the two characters. A wall splat is when a character is hit against a wall and gets stuck to it. Characters take more damage while they are stuck to a wall, and the strongest combos in Pokken come from wall splats. Okay, as your reward for sticking around to the end of this, I'm going to combine multiple concepts into a single option select. I'm going to input 5YY, slight delay, 8A, then another slight delay, and Y. When I make contact with the opponent, the Pokke combo will come out, which will be Shadow Mewtwo's 2 jabs into Sidewave. The 8A, which is Side Strike, won't come out because I overrode it with the third Y input before the Side Strike could come out. Now I'm going to do this exact same input, but I'm going to have them use an armored attack this time. In this case, a counter. As you saw, even though I did the same inputs as before, only one jab came out and then it was immediately cancelled into Side Strike. This is because the extra hit stop or impact freeze of the counter attack stopped my character in place and increased how much time it took to finish my Pokke combo. So the game overwrote my second Y input with an 8A. Now I'm going to go in depth about how to create your own option selects, and I'll explain this a little bit more thoroughly in a later chapter, but it's going to be really far down the road. Anyway, hopefully you found that entertaining. Thanks so much for watching this whole video. Everything from here on out is going to be much shorter for sure. Chapter 3 will be all about mastering field phase.